comfortable under the Virginian's lead, but a little later than their calculations. And here was I, a little too early, and a witness in consequence. My presence seemed a simple thing to account for, but when I had thus accounted for it, one of them said with good nature, "So you find us here, and we find you here. Which is the most surprised, I wonder?" "There's no telling," said I, keeping as amiable as I could. "Nor any telling which objects the most." "Oh, there's no objection here. You're welcome to stay. But not welcome to go, I expect. He ain't welcome to go, is he?" By the answers that their faces gave him it was plain that I was not. "Not till we are through," said one. "He needn't to see anything," another added. "Better sleep late to-morrow morning," a third suggested to me. I did not wish to stay here. I could have made some sort of camp apart from them before dark, but in the face of their needless caution I was helpless. I made no attempt to inquire what kind of spy they imagined I could be, what sort of rescue I could bring in this lonely country. My too early appearance seemed to be all that they looked at. And again my eyes sought the prisoners. Certainly there were only two. One was chewing tobacco, and talking now and then to his guard as if nothing were the matter. The other sat dull in silence, not moving his eyes, but his face worked, and I noticed how he continually moistened his dry lips. As I looked at these doomed prisoners, whose fate I was invited to sleep through to-morrow morning, the one who was chewing quietly nodded to me. "You don't remember me?" he said. It was Steve. Steve of Medicine Bow. The pleasant Steve of my first evening in the West. Some change of beard had delayed my instant recognition of his face. Here he sat, sentenced to die. A shock, chill and painful, deprived me of speech. He had no such weak feelings. "Have you been to Medicine Bow lately?" he inquired. "That's getting to be quite a while ago." I assented. I should have liked to say something natural and kind, but words stuck against my will, and I stood awkward and ill at ease, noticing idly that the silent one wore a gray flannel shirt like mine. Steve looked me over, and saw in my pocket the newspaper which I had brought from the railroad, and on which I had penciled a few expenses. He asked me would I mind letting him have it for a while, and I gave it to him eagerly, begging him to keep it as long as he wanted. I was over eager in my embarrassment. "You need not return it at all," I said. "Those notes are nothing. Do keep it." He gave me a short glance and a smile. "Thank you," he said. "I'll not need it beyond to-morrow morning." And he began to search through it. "Jake's election is considered sure," he said to his companion, who made no response. "Well, Fremont County owes it to Jake." And I left him interested in the local news. Dead men I have seen not a few times, even some lying pale and terrible after violent ends, and the edge of this wears off, but I hope I shall never again have to be in the company with men waiting to be killed. By this time to-morrow the gray flannel shirt would be buttoned round a corpse. Until what moment would Steve chew? Against such fancies as these I managed presently to barricade my mind, but I made a plea to be allowed to pass the night elsewhere, and I suggested the adjacent cabin. By their faces I saw that my words merely helped their distrust of me. The cabin leaked too much, they said. I would sleep drier here. One man gave it to me more directly. "If you figured on camping in this stable, what has changed your mind?" How could I tell them that I shrunk from any contact with what they were doing, although I knew that only so could justice be dealt in this country? Their wholesome frontier nerves knew nothing of such refinements. But the Virginian understood part of it. "I am right sorry for your annoyance," he said. And now I noticed he was under a constraint very different from the ease of the others. After the 12 hours' ride my bones were hungry for rest. I spread my blankets on some straw in a stall by myself and rolled up in them. Yet I lay growing broader awake, every inch of weariness stricken from my excited senses. For a while they sat over their counsels, whispering cautiously, so that I was made curious to hear them by not being able. Was it the names of Trampas and Shorty that were once or twice spoken? I could not be sure. I heard the whisperers cease and separate. I heard their boots as they cast them off upon the ground. And I heard the breathing of slumber begin and grow in the interior silence. To one after one sleep came, but not to me. Outside, the dull fall of the rain beat evenly, and in some angle dripped the spouting pulses of a leak. Sometimes a cold air blew in, bearing with it the keen wet odor of the sagebrush. On hundreds of other nights this perfume had been my last waking remembrance. It had seemed to help drowsiness. And now I lay staring, thinking of this. Twice through the hours the thieves shifted their positions with clumsy sounds, exchanging muted words with their guard. So often had I heard other companions move and mutter in the darkness and lie down again. It was the very naturalness and usualness of every fact of the night, the stable straw, the rain outside, my familiar blankets, the cool visits of the wind, and with all this the thought of Steve chewing and the man in the gray flannel shirt, that made the hours unearthly and strung me tight with suspense. And at last I heard someone get up and begin to dress. In a little while I saw light suddenly through my closed eyelids, and then darkness shut again abruptly upon them. They had swung in a lantern and found me by mistake. I was the only one they did not wish to rouse. Moving and quiet talking set up around me, and they began to go out of the stable. At the gleams of new daylight which they let in, my thoughts went to the clump of cottonwoods, and I lay still, with hands and feet growing steadily cold. Now it was going to happen. I wondered how they would do it. One instance had been described to me by a witness, but that was done from a bridge, and there had been but a single victim. This morning, would one have to wait and see the other go through with it first? The smell of smoke reached me, and next the rattle of tin dishes. Breakfast was something I had forgotten, and one of them was cooking it now in the dry shelter of the stable. He was alone, because the talking and the steps were outside the stable, and I could hear the sounds of horses being driven into the corral and saddled. Then I perceived that the coffee was ready, and almost immediately the cook called them. One came in, shutting the door behind him as he re-entered, which the rest, as they followed, imitated, for at each opening of the door I saw the light of day leap into the stable and heard the louder sounds of the rain. Then the sound and the light would again be shut out, until someone at length spoke out bluntly, bidding the door be left open on account of the smoke. What were they hiding from? He asked. The runaways that had escaped? A laugh followed this sally, and the door was left open. Thus I learned that there had been more thieves than the two that were captured. It gave a little more ground for their suspicion about me and my anxiety to pass the night elsewhere. It cost nothing to detain me, and they were taking no chances, however remote. The fresh air and the light now filled the stable, and I lay listening while their breakfast brought more talk from them. They were more at ease now than was I, who had nothing to do but carry out my role of slumber in the stall. They spoke in a friendly, ordinary way, as if this were like every other morning of the week to them. They addressed the prisoners with a sort of fraternal kindness, not bringing them pointedly into the conversation, nor yet pointedly leaving them out. I made out that they must all be sitting round the breakfast together, those who had to die and those who had to kill them. The Virginian I never heard speak, but I heard the voice of Steve. He discussed with his captors the sundry points of his capture. "Do you remember a haystack?" he asked. Away up the South Fork of Gros Ventre?" "That was Thursday.